engaged in the civics things.
And we have heard that in other evidence that for people when they first arrive in Australia, they're so focused on the citizenship pathway, and that is such a big piece of what they've got to do, that there's sort of not much room for other things, and that maybe the opportunity is after that. On how you then reach people with that opportunity, is that working through community groups? Is it a public education campaign? How are you talking to people, or how would you think we should be talking to people once they are in a position to say, okay, I'm an Australian citizen, I feel a bit more secure, a bit more settled, I want to think about how I participate more broadly. What are the opportunities there? I
would comment on the efforts of resources available from Parliamentary Education Office and the Election Commission, and from the state or territory election commissions as well. But for it to reach the community people, we need to reach to the grassroots communities. So through different tiers, there can be an advisory committee at the federal level, there can be advisory committee at the state levels, where that interacts with the local electoral commission, who can take messages to the local community leaders, and the local community leaders should convey the messages to their own communities. Because there are communities where they trust their leaders, so it is important for us to reach out to them and pass the message to them. So the resources are good, and the translated material as well, translated material as much as possible, and reach it to the community through the community leaders or the community groups. There are so many associations, so it may be hard for the reach to individual communities at the federal level. So the federal level reach to the local level, local committees, local things like us, the community groups like us can take it to the individual communities. I don't know whether there can be possibility of some small grants for them to so people use these grants for the community gatherings, even for the COVID vaccination and other things. They use it as a grant to create awareness, and some community gatherings as well. Yeah, small grants may be available, so they gather together and discuss about this thing. That is also a possible way.
And from your experience, are you seeing more people of culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds actually running for office at local government or
it's not more, even it is not that doesn't reflect the proportion of migrants living in Australia, but I'm telling they are coming up, so I appreciate that.
So there is more. You're seeing more interest.
More interest,
in nominating for a position.
Yes.
And what is that coming about through the work of groups like your council, or why? What is it? Greater awareness? What are you seeing?
A little bit. I can't say, because here when it comes to run for elections, the individual need to put their hand up, and especially when you are a migrant, not a second generation. You didn't come here as a kid, you came here as an adult, so your accent is different. Even though you speak good English, you can write better than many of the people. When you go, you are treated as like your communication skill is low, so it is they have got a lot of barriers to come up to lead. So they can be doctors, they are engineers who are very technically sound, and they can be in higher positions because they are very good in technical things. But when it comes to leadership and the roles like a manager or other thing, it is always there is a barrier, and they say that. And they don't care much because they get a better life than what they would have got back home. So, and they are settling their kids. So coming to this, running for election takes a lot of efforts for them. And I'm seeing people doing that now recently, even at the territory level, and I appreciate that. So there is interest. And when someone runs for an election, so I ran for council election 8 years ago as an independent. This is territory is more like a party oriented, but I would see that I myself, and even some people told, you are the first person who ran, and now it is gauging some interest, because some people never ever thought even people asked me, would you think when you migrated to Australia some 9 years ago, would you thought that you would run for election? I said no. So that is also like, creating some interest, gauging interest from other people, then they think what we can do and other things. And now there is a good number, even for the party-based territory election, I'm happy about that. So when someone runs for that thing, the people from the community, I can see that they are interested in, when one of them who came as a migrant, adult migrant, when they are running for that, they want to know what is this, how whether there is a chance for him to get elected, how does the preferential voting works, like, all those things, like, people, it doesn't mean that they can speak to the candidate, because candidate may not be available all the time, he will be door knocking. But when we go to the community event, I can see that interest as well. It is not that whether the person wins or not, but there is an interest in the community, they become like, aware of those things. So it is, what I say is, it is an eventual process. There should be an ongoing education, and it is not with a single election, some campaign material for the single election, just for that voting or other thing. Even many people expressed their disappointment with the postal votes, because many of them go overseas, and in many of the overseas postal systems, they don't get mails properly unless it is an expressed or registered post. So it was, I could see some of the genuine people, they didn't get stuff there. But the election commission they are a little bit lenient in that. They understand even if you give a call and if you let them know. And I had a meeting with the Northern Territory Electoral Commission, which I was not aware of. She said, if you ring and tell that I'm going overseas, postal vote is not reachable in my place, or I will be traveling, you can be excused. So these are the things which when people speak, I actually directed them to the postal vote, and sometimes they get frustrated as well. I can see that. So there are things that they are not aware of those things, which help them as well. They don't have to be frustrated for fine. And the fine is, some of the people think fine is not a big thing. I've heard in one of the, I think this morning I was listening to a hearing, I think from Darwin City Council, right? Yeah, they spoke about increasing the fine. I would also recommend that, but with the consideration for people who are traveling overseas.
So reasonable excuse.
Yes, very reasonable excuse. When they, yeah.
Just like you mentioned education, are you referring to education of younger people through the formal education system, or are you talking about mature age education through other networks?
I really don't have much knowledge, because I didn't do my school education here. I worked in a school, but I have spoken to, before coming to this inquiry, I have spoken to people studying in different jurisdictions, a couple of jurisdictions, because my sister and family lives in New South Wales. They are school teachers there, and I spoke to people in Germany. I spoke to people in America, my friends, migrants, and with their the kids actually studying there. So school education is somehow training them with these things, but it doesn't mean when they become 18, there is a gap.
Yeah.
So, and when they become politically involved, I have seen that in people who ran for the school representative, yes, but he said school representative. But when they voted and when they reached 18, they didn't remember which party they voted. Oh, one in blue or something like that. They were telling one in blue or red, So it doesn't always translate into the actual citizenship, but still that education is good. The people even going for school, the students, young students, they can generate their first generation parents sometimes. With this.
So students coming home from school explain to their parents how
parents, yeah, this is how system works here. The politics works differently sometimes, yeah. But I'm telling, even for those school students, when they reach 18, so many, as I mentioned, you might have seen as well, many of the mainstream Australians also struggle. They don't, who are very good in English, they also struggle. They don't understand system. They haven't given enough importance to the above the line and below the line. So some type of ongoing education is required, and particularly that emphasis on migrants to reach out to their communities and to a special education to them. Education means resources, then making them aware of those resources, or some of the leaders. So train a trainer, so they can train the people in their community in their language.
And on that, in terms of, because I agree with you that many Australians also sometimes struggle with how to vote, and obviously when people do go to vote, it is part of what AEC officials at a polling booth can explain to them is here's how you cast a formal vote. And did you say you've worked as a AEC official, or?
Yes. When I worked full time in the other government job, I worked just for the day and sometimes for the early voting. Yeah, because I'm interested in that. I'm interested in that. When I migrated to Australia in 2018, because I was more interested in politics in the community and other thing, I didn't have a job. So I was under the protection of my sister and brother-in-law, but I used to go to library. To the extent they reprimanded me, saying that your priority is to get a job, not to go to library and read these things and other things. But I'm different. I'm single. That's my life ambition is different. But normally people, they have their ambition is different, so they don't concentrate much on that. So I work for AEC rather than for the money. The money is not that great when you work for that thing. AEC means like when you work for a polling official.
That's right. Yeah. So
I worked for 2 or 3 elections back in New South Wales here and just in the referendum.
Yes. Okay.
So in the territory election, I'd want to work, but I don't want, because territory election is like, it is more like I'm a community leader in some of the things. It shouldn't be seen as. Yeah, that's the reason.
So one of the things around the workforce in those polling places is, as you're saying, it's a temporary workforce.
Yes, correct.
And
correct.
So often it is drawn from probably retired people.
Yes, most of them are retired.
That's right, who are like, I'll get a bit of extra money, but I'm not working full time.
Yes.
So if we think about that in terms of that explanation that can be given to people from culturally diverse backgrounds, it is unlikely that you rock up at a polling place and you find someone who can speak your language, who's employed by the AEC. You're more likely to come across an older Australian who speaks English. So do you think it would be helpful if there were people, if we looked at the data of where there are polling places based in communities with a large
I have seen
community of
that.
migrants,
Yes.
would it be helpful if the AEC was making sure that there were people employed at that polling station who could speak relevant languages to that community?
I would say it is an ideal case, but it cannot be realized in practice. Because people turning up to an electoral booth, they can speak 50, 100 languages. Only 10 or 20 people are working in a polling booth. It's not practically possible. So that's what I emphasize, the prior education before they get to the polling booth. And in the polling booth, education is very limited. When I worked as a polling official, I'm not going to explain what is that above the line, we would just state 2 lines. You can vote above the line, choose a party, or choose your own things below the line. But that is not enough. We can't spend 15 minutes for that person or for a group, and we can't do that in a group. So prior education I would emphasize more on prior education. So polling booth education is very limited, even if you know the language.
So would that material in advance of the election, would that best be delivered online resources?
Online visuals, and it should reach them through their community leaders or through their community groups. It should reach them. You have got resources, but it should reach them. So the more awareness, when you come to the cold communities, you need to emphasize on that part, how it reaches them. Don't just go to the Centrelink website. Don't just go to the job site website. Go to the Parliament Education Office. Go to the AEC and all those things. That education is required.
Part of what we're looking at in this inquiry is where people do get their information from, and in the context of a rise of misinformation and disinformation in election environments, is misinformation and disinformation around elections, do you think, a concern amongst migrant communities? And I'm thinking here about material that people might find on social media platforms, or that they might share through WhatsApp.
Yeah, so it is a concern, just like the other communities. It is a concern in other communities as well. Whether it's about a vaccine, there may be some truth in that. There may be a lot of misinformation and disinformation or people may have a vested interest, or some people just want to, for their psychological satisfaction, like a vandalism, they do all these things. So people are also like, but it is not, I wouldn't say it is more on migrant communities. It is just like the other communities. And it also depends on where they come from and how it reaches to them and other things. So with the social media, some of the people use some of the social media, some of the ethnic groups use some other social media, and there is a lot of impact in that. It is just like other communities.
Thank you. Darren, did you have any further questions?
No, I'm
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your attendance today and for sharing this information with the committee. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday, 2nd August 2024. I now declare this hearing closed.
Thank you, one and all.